All right, in this little video, I'm going to talk about jig fishing, particularly jig fishing for smallmouth, and largemouth too, I guess. I've done really well jig fishing for largemouth in the last 2 years. So my favorite jig that I make myself is a stand-up football jig, and I make it. This one here happens to be 1/4 ounce. With a little wire bait keeper in it right there. And I powder coat them in green pumpkin, black, and this, if you can see it, this is a black and blue fleck. And this is tied on a 1/0 mustad jig hook. And I tie this, I'd probably tie 50, 60 of these a winter just to get me through the winter. I'm hard on stuff. I lose stuff. So what I have found is when you're throwing jigs for smallmouth, less is more. I never use more than 1 tab, period, on a jig for smallmouth. I'll take a tab and I'll split it in half. Literally split it in half. And I'll put half on the top, and I'll put half on the bottom. And my thread of choice for building these jigs is Danville's flat wax nylon thread, because it's very durable. And you don't need a bunch of wraps. I see guys making jigs, and they got about 600 wraps on the jig, and you don't need that. I'll put 3 or 4 wraps on each half of this, and it'll hold it in place. And the jigs never fall apart. I never have the skirts come off. So we'll just spin this one up quick. There's 3, 4. And then I'll just pull the skirt down off the sides. Snug it a little bit. Make it 1 more wrap. I'll flip the vise over. And I'll do the same thing for what's considered the bottom. 1. Got me mixed up here. 2, 3, 4. And I'll move that skirt around so it's filled in evenly all the way around the collar. And this particular skirting is from fishing skirts. And I'll just do a couple half hitches. 1, 2, 3. I usually do 4 half hitches. And then I'll pull the tag end up. I'll cut it so it's about 3/4 of an inch long. And then I take a little torch and I melt the thread, the end of the thread. And what that does is it creates a little ball on the end of the thread. That way the thread can't come back through your half hitches. And I don't use any head cement. I don't use any kind of thread glue, nothing like that. I've been tying these jigs like this for 3, 4 years. And honest to God, I have not lost 1 skirt. It just holds them. And for smallmouth, I'll come back about 1/2 inch past the bend of the hook, and I'll snip the skirt off. Excuse me. So you're left with this. And then I'll pull the skirt all down. Get it all bunched around the shank of the hook. Being ornery. And then I'll take my weed guard. I prefer nylon weed guards. I've made jigs with metal weed guards, but sometimes once they get bent, you can't bend them back and they just don't work the same. So I prefer a nylon weed guard. And I'll take a dab of super glue. This happens to be Loctite. And there's a hole there for your weed guard to go in if you can see it. I'll put 2 or 3 drops down in there. If I can hold it steady. This one might be empty. That one is empty. Don't open super glue with your mouth. It's a bad idea. So we're gonna use some of this Gorilla super glue gel. It works the same. Maybe not. Maybe I don't have any of this opened. There we go. So we just put a dab of that down in there. Wipe off any excess off the head. Take your weed guard. Push it down in the hole. Now this next step is something to speed things up a little bit. So I found this at Hobby Lobby, but you can get on various sites. This is Bob Smith Industries Instaset. So I'll take one of these, I call them little test tubers. I'll put a little bit of that Instaset in there, and I'll drop it right on the weed guard. And that instantly dries that super glue. Like, it's pretty much instant. That way you can make these and take them fishing and go right away with them. I have found if you squirt that Bob Smith Industries Instaset on, it actually turns the head of the jig white because it leaves a residue. So if you just dab it on, and that's in there, it's on there. If you just dab it on, it soaks down around the nylon and cures it right away. Now, also, if you spray that Bob Smith Industries Instaset on, what it will do is it will react with your skirting material. And it basically melts it and makes it all wiry all over the place. Like it pretty much, it just goes haywire. So if you just dab it on there, if you just dab it around the nylon, it soaks down in there and it doesn't get over the skirt and over the head. Then what I do is I will cut on the eye side. I will cut at least half, if not more, of that weed guard away, down as close as I can to the jig. And what that does is it makes the weed guard thinner, so it doesn't take as much penetration, especially in the wintertime. Because in the wintertime, these fish are just barely picking it up. And if they feel any resistance at all, they drop it right away. So I'll cut at least half of that, if not more, away, so I can get a good solid hook set. So now we only have, if you can see that, get my head out of the way. Now there's only about 5 or 6 fibers there. And then I will cut them off in line with the barb. So there is your weed guard. And then when you take your finger over it, it don't take much pressure at all. So you can start feeling that tip of that hook. And the reason I cut it off the front side is you can cut more of the weed guard away. If you cut it off on the back side, that has to bend over where you cut it off. So 5 or 6 fibers left, it's still too stiff to get a hook penetration. This particular jig is my most productive jig. It's black and blue glitter scale, black and blue powder, very basic, nothing special. And I like to tip it with either a Z-Man TRD bugs or the Z-Man bat wings. Largemouth seem to really prefer the bat wings over the bugs. I think it's because it's a larger profile claw area. Anybody that has thrown Z-Man stuff knows that to get them up over our hook keeper isn't always the easiest thing. But once they're up over pretty much forever. You'll wear this jig out before you wear that bait out. And that's what we have right there. Black and blue. This is a 1/4 ounce on a 1/0 hook. I have thrown 1/4 ounce on 3/0 hooks for largemouth with the 3.5 inch bat wings, and just this year I caught 2 over 7, 1 over 8 pounds. Same jig. But for the largemouth jig, I will use 2 skirts. 1 above, 1 below. And the bigger bat wings. So here is what it looks like with the bigger bat wings. This is a 1/4 ounce on a 3/0 hook. And when that jig hits the bottom, it's a stand-up jig. With that much Z-Man plastic, it will literally stand up like this. And then these claws just quiver and wave. That is the most deadliest jig I've ever thrown. And I've been throwing this jig now for 2.5 years. And I pretty much exclusively only throw a black and blue jig. Once in a great while, I'll throw green pumpkin or peanut butter and jelly, depending on watercolor. But for the most part, it's straight black and blue jig. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll make them all the way down to this is an 1/8 ounce. Now this is not a stand-up. This is just a regular football, but I'll make them down to an 1/8 ounce. And I modify my jig to take a little wire bait keeper here, because the mold has a lead bait keeper on it, but it just doesn't. There, you can see it better. The lead bait keeper just doesn't hold it as well as the wire bait keeper, so I modified the mold a little bit to take the wire bait keeper. But same principle. Half of a skirt to the top, half of the skirt to the bottom. This is also on a 1/0 hook. The black and blue jig, hands down, no question, is my most productive color. Again, as I said in other videos, I do not make jigs or baits of any kind to sell. I have friends that do that, and I wouldn't want to step on their toes. They do it partially for a living, partially for fun. I have too much respect for people that I know that do this and do it to make money. So, unfortunately, I will not sell or list for sale any of my stuff. If you're looking for any of these jigs or any color jigs or specialty jigs, you can reach out to Ken Glassner at Ken's Jigs. He will get you hooked up. He can make you about anything you can possibly think of as far as jigs. And if he doesn't have the mold, he'll probably get it for you. That pretty much wraps this up. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to reach out. And hope to see you on the water. Tight lines.